Take me with you. I can cook, I can give you children too, she murmured to the lonesome cowboy. The dusty trail stretched out in both directions, nothing but scrub brush, wind, and silence. The sun hung low, copper gold against the western sky, casting long shadows across the prairie. The town of Ash Hollow lay behind him, just a scattering of wooden buildings clinging to survival at the edge of nowhere. To most men, there was nothing worth looking back on. But to Colton Hayes, the lonesome cowboy with a battered hat pulled low over his brow, Ash Hollow was a place that reminded him of what he'd lost. Years of drifting, years of watching other men marry, raise families, settle down, it all pressed against him sometimes like an ache in the bones. He had buried his family back in Texas, and since then, the saddle had been his only home. He had promised himself he didn't need anyone. Promised he could ride alone until the day his horse outlasted him. That was before she stopped him. She was standing near the edge of the town's livery barn, clutching her shawl tight around her thin shoulders. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair, the color of wheat at harvest, caught in the wind, framing a face that had known too much sorrow for someone so young. "Sir," she called out softly at first, but when he didn't turn, she hurried a few steps closer. Colton reined his horse and glanced back, wary. Folks didn't usually stop him. His solitude was a shield most respected. "Please," her voice trembled as she lifted her eyes to his. "Take me with you." The words startled him. No woman had ever asked him that, not a stranger, not like this. He shifted in the saddle, frowning. "Ma'am, I think you got the wrong man." Her hands twisted together, knuckles pale. "I can cook. I can sew. I can bear you children too. Just don't leave me here." The raw desperation in her whisper pierced through Colton's guarded heart. He studied her closer, noticing the fading bruises along her wrist, the hollow in her cheeks from skipped meals. The town wasn't kind to the weak, and this girl looked as if she had weathered more storms than most. "What's your name?" he asked at last, his voice rough. "Mary Beth," she answered quickly, like she had been waiting all her life for someone to ask. "Mary Beth." He rolled the name slowly, still uncertain. "Why me?" "Because you look like a man who wouldn't leave me behind," she said simply, her voice breaking but her eyes steady. Colton shifted again, torn between instinct and compassion. He had spent years convincing himself he needed no one. But there was something in her gaze, a plea deeper than words, that made him hesitate. "Who hurt you?" he asked, nodding toward the marks on her wrist. "My uncle," she admitted in a low voice. "He took me in after Mama died, but I'm just another mouth to feed to him. He says I'll be sold off soon enough." Her chin lifted slightly in defiance. "I'd rather go with you, even if you're a stranger." Her honesty rattled him. Most women would cling to family no matter how cruel, but Mary Beth, she was choosing her own way, desperate though it seemed. Colton rubbed a hand over his jaw, staring out at the fading horizon. He could say no. He could ride on, leave her behind like he had left so many others in his travels. But the image of her standing alone at the livery, small, fragile, yet fiercely determined, lodged itself in his chest. Finally, he exhaled a long, weary breath. "All right, Mary Beth. You can ride with me. But it won't be easy. I ain't got a house waiting. Just miles of trail, hard days, and cold nights." "I don't care," she said quickly, hope flooding her face. "I'd rather face hardship with you than stay here one more night." Colton nodded, and something inside him shifted, like the first crack in the stone walls he had built around his heart. He reached down a calloused hand. She hesitated only a moment before placing her smaller, trembling hand in his. He pulled her up onto the saddle behind him, and she clung to his waist as if she'd found her anchor in a storm. They rode in silence for hours, the only sound the creak of leather and the steady thud of hooves. The prairie opened wide before them, endless and untamed. Mary Beth pressed her cheek against Colton's back, drawing comfort from the steady rise and fall of his breathing. As the stars began to spill across the night sky, Colton finally spoke. "You ever been beyond Ash Hollow?" "No," she admitted softly. "I've never seen anything but dust and barns. But I've dreamed of rivers, of forests so thick you can't see the sky. I've dreamed of a place where no one tells me I'm worthless." Colton's grip tightened on the reins. You're not worthless, Mary Beth. Don't let anyone plant that poison in your head. Her throat caught, and she whispered, You don't even know me. I know enough, he said gruffly. She smiled faintly against his back, for the first time in years feeling seen. By midnight they had made camp beside a trickling stream. Colton unsaddled his horse with practiced ease, while Mary Beth gathered kindling for a small fire. Though her hands shook, she moved with determination, eager to prove her worth. When the fire crackled to life, Colton handed her a strip of jerky from his pack. It ain't much, but it'll fill your belly. She accepted it gratefully, chewing slowly as the warmth of the flames softened the chill of the night. Thank you, she murmured. He grunted in reply, leaning back against his saddle. His eyes lingered on her across the fire, noticing how the firelight chased away some of the shadows from her face. She looked young again, hopeful. For a long while, they said nothing. The stars wheeled above them, ancient and watchful. Finally, Mary Beth spoke in a voice so quiet he almost missed it. You don't have to keep me, you know. If you change your mind tomorrow, just say so. Colton's brow furrowed. Is that what you think? That I'd toss you aside like you don't matter? She dropped her gaze. It's what everyone else has done. His chest tightened. Slowly, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Mary Beth, I don't make promises I can't keep. You asked me to take you with me. I said yes. That means something. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Then I'll do everything I can to be useful to you. I can cook. I can mend clothes. And when the time comes, her voice hitched, but she steadied it, I can give you children. Colton's throat worked as he swallowed. He wasn't a man used to tenderness, nor to being offered such devotion. But there it was, plain as day, her willingness to build a life beside him, however rough the road. He cleared his throat. One step at a time, Mary Beth. Let's just see tomorrow first. She nodded, but inside, her heart was already latching onto hope like a bird finding its wings. That night, as she lay wrapped in his extra blanket near the fire, Mary Beth whispered into the dark, not knowing if he could hear. Thank you for not leaving me. Across the fire, Colton opened his eyes. He didn't answer, but a rare softness flickered across his face. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something more than loneliness, something that might just grow into love. And neither of them knew it yet, but the journey they had begun would change them forever. The morning dawned clear and cool, the prairie bathed in pale gold light. Mary Beth stirred beneath the blanket, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard ground, but her heart oddly light. For the first time in years, she hadn't woken to the sound of her uncle's angry voice or the weight of hopelessness pressing her down. Instead, she woke to the steady crackle of a fire and the quiet presence of Colton Hayes. He was already up, crouched by the stream washing his face. The rising sun lit his profile, sharp and rugged, a man carved by years of wind and dust. Mary Beth watched him for a moment, shy but unafraid. Something in him made her feel safe, even though she barely knew him. When he noticed her awake, he gave a slight nod. "Mornin', Duck." "Morning," she replied softly, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Colton reached into his pack and tossed her a small sack of ground cornmeal. "Ain't much, but you said you can cook. Let's see if you meant it." Mary Beth smiled faintly. "Yes, sir." She moved quickly, gathering water from the stream, mixing it with the cornmeal, and fashioning simple cakes to cook on a flat rock by the fire. Her hands remembered what her mama had taught her before life had turned cruel. When the cakes were ready, she handed one to Colton, her breath held as he took a bite. He chewed slowly, then gave a single nod. "Not bad." Relief flooded her, and she couldn't help a small laugh. High praise from a cowboy. His mouth curved just slightly at the corner, almost a smile. "Don't get used to it." But Mary Beth had seen the glimmer in his eyes. It was the first sign that the walls around his heart weren't as solid as he thought. They traveled for days, moving steadily across the plains. The land stretched wide and empty, but Mary Beth no longer felt the loneliness she once did. She rode behind Colton, clinging to him not only for balance but for the comfort of his presence. At night, they camped beneath the stars. She cooked what little they had, mended his worn shirts, and listened to his stories, few and far between, but always laced with quiet strength. He spoke of Texas, of the family he had lost to fever, of the years he had wandered. "You've been alone a long time," she said gently one evening. He stared into the fire. "Alone's easier. No one to bury." Mary Beth's heart ached at the raw honesty in his voice. She reached across the fire, her fingers brushing his hand. "Maybe it's not about what's easier. Maybe it's about what makes life worth living." His gaze lifted to hers, and for a long moment neither looked away. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but undeniable. One afternoon, trouble found them. They had stopped near an abandoned homestead to water the horse when three rough-looking men rode up, their eyes narrowing at the sight of Mary Beth. "Well, well," the leader drawled, his teeth yellowed. "Looks like you picked yourself up a pretty little thing, cowboy." Colton stepped forward, placing himself between Mary Beth and the men. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver. "Keep ridin'," he said coldly. The men laughed. "What's she worth to you? We might make a trade." Mary Beth's heart pounded as one of them dismounted, swaggering closer. But before he could take another step, Colton's revolver was drawn, gleaming in the sunlight. "I said keep ridin'," Colton repeated, his voice like steel. The man froze, eyes darting to the gun. After a tense moment, the leader spat on the ground. "Ain't worth the trouble. Come on, boys." They mounted up and rode off, cursing under their breath. Mary Beth collapsed against the water trough, trembling. Colton holstered his gun and turned to her, his face softening. "You all right?" She nodded, though tears spilled down her cheeks. "If you hadn't been here—" He knelt beside her, gently brushing a tear away with his thumb. "I'm here, and I'll keep bein' here." Her breath caught at the tenderness in his touch. For the first time, she believed his words. That night, she sat close beside him by the fire, their shoulders brushing. The fear of the day had stripped away the last of her shyness. "Colton," she whispered. When I said I could give you children, I didn't just mean to bargain for safety. I meant it because I want a family. I want a home. With you." His throat tightened. He wasn't a man given to sentiment, but her words struck deep. He turned to her, his rough, weathered hand cupping her cheek. "Mary Beth," he said softly, "I don't know much about forever, but I do know I ain't lettin' you go." Her heart swelled, and before she could lose courage, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, shy and trembling, but he responded with a fierce tenderness that left her breathless. In that moment, the lonely cowboy and the girl who had been cast aside found something neither had dared to dream of: love. Weeks passed, and the prairie slowly gave way to rolling hills and scattered woods. Together they built a rhythm, traveling by day, sharing stories by night. Colton began to laugh more, the sound surprising even himself. Mary Beth's cheeks grew fuller, her eyes brighter, no longer haunted by hunger and fear. One evening, they came across a small valley with a clear river winding through it, tall grass waving like a sea. Colton reined in his horse and looked out over the land. "This could be it," he said quietly. Mary Beth followed his gaze, her hand tightening on his arm. "Home." He nodded. "We could build. Raise cattle. Raise whatever the good Lord gives us." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "I've never had a home that was truly mine." "You do now," Colton said firmly. The work was hard, but they faced it together. They built a rough cabin from timber, their hands blistered but their hearts full. Mary Beth planted a small garden, while Colton mended fences and hunted game. At night, they lay side by side on a straw mattress, whispering dreams of the future. It wasn't an easy life, but it was theirs. And in every laugh, every shared meal, every quiet moment, their love deepened. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves blazed gold around their little homestead, Colton came in from the fields and found Mary Beth by the fire, her hands resting gently over her belly. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes and a radiant smile. "Colton," she whispered, "we're going to have a child." For a moment, he stood frozen. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. His voice broke as he murmured, "Mary Beth, you've given me back everything I thought I lost." She held him tight, whispering back, "You gave me a life worth living." And in the glow of the fire, with the prairie wind singing outside their cabin, the lonesome cowboy and the girl who had once begged not to be left behind sealed the promise of a love that would carry them through all the days to come.